bunker punks, or how Dr. White would put it, domestic terrorism. No, that's just normal terrorism. Nope, that's just communism. Yeah, much better. That's so good. Can you also smell the freedom already? So what is bunker punks? Bunker punks is an old-school first-person roguelite shooter with flat characters in a 3D environment, and by flat, I don't mean that they have flat characters. They are literally flat. I mean, for fuck's sake, humans are so fucking weird. I hate them. I love them. Anyways, what is the first thing we have to look at? If your answer wasn't menus, leave. Subscribe to my channel. Watch all my other videos. Also follow me on Twitter and join my Discord maybe. Then you might get it. At first, the menu looks fine, but there are a few problems with it, especially when it comes to in-game menus. Like many good menus, we have a continue, new game, and options, and exit, and credits button. You might think, Melitelli, shouldn't that be like a standard? And yes, human, you would be correct. It should be a standard. But in the indie scene, it might happen that an option like the exit button is non-existent. So I feel the urge, or I feel the duty to dissect menus and point out even the most basic stuff, because your menu is kind of your calling card. It's the first thing your player is going to see. If your menu sucks, then you already left a bad impression, and you wouldn't want that, would you? There's one small thing that most people won't even encounter, and that is depending on the window size, you might encounter white letters on white background, making the top option of the menu, continue option, harder to read. You can still read it, it's just a small thing that I noticed. It's not major, it's not even worth talking about. The options are decent. We have resolutions, we have window modes, music volumes, effect volumes, keyboard bindings, and this is a good thing. This is very good. But you might have noticed that the menu art is not filling the whole picture. Those small black bars on the left and right side are not for me, it's the game. Depending on the resolution, those bars will vanish, and specifically on the resolutions I use, those being 1280 for window mode and 1920 for full screen, those black bars appear. Another thing that I noticed was that depending on the resolution, the menu art crops one of the characters, and I know this is very pedantic, but you have to understand one thing, humans, when I say the menu is a calling card, I kind of mean it. Even the smallest thing can throw a player off, and, elitists can be very toxic. Mistakes are automatically a credit to incompetence and carelessness, especially as an indie developer. You don't want to trigger anything inside the player that could create negative feelings, because any negative review will diminish your success, and unfortunately you have to deal with the elitists. I'm kind of an elitist, so yeah, me pointing out is kind of a little bit toxic, but I don't care, because I'm human. Yes. Let us continue. So, another thing I noticed was that options layer on top of each other, meaning that once I press, for example, a new game, the dialog pops up, and then I press another option, the new option is layered on top of the last one. But that is also not consistent. Pressing options in the new game will produce that behavior. Pressing exit on top of that will vanish the new game dialog, but we will layer the exit dialog on top of the options. On the other hand, new game and exit will never layer on top of each other. It's really weird, but like I already mentioned, menu is important, blah blah, play impression, blah blah. You will get the point of this thing later. Thanks. So once you start a fresh new game, I'm going to explain the tag shop mechanic, and I'm going to explain why I think it's pointless, or at least a little bit pointless. So throughout the game, you can get something called tag. It drops once you kill an enemy or destroy some environmental objects. You pick it up, finish the level, and when all your punks die, you get the option to buy persistent upgrades for your bunker. Things like weapons, armor, bigger bunkers, and more characters. Once you buy all the upgrades, you still will be thrown back to the shifty van that sells you upgrades, but then it's pointless because you can't earn tech anymore and everything is sold out, so why are we here? It's kind of pointless. There's no reason to be here. Yeah. What could have been done here are temporary upgrades, meaning once you buy all the upgrades, you could, for example, double your damage on the next run, or make you faster, or double your cash, or the options are limitless. Also, the tech shop should be available at all times and not at the end of your journey. How it is right now is just a pointless menu once you get all the upgrades. Except if the intention was to restart the game once you finish it and unlock all the upgrades you got already, but I'm not sure about that. Good, back to the game. Once you buy all the tech upgrades and start a new game, choose a difficulty. You are given a choice of 6 punks. Molly fucking Pop, good with the pistol, and she's prone to force push everyone. Not the best girlfriend, but she's cool and has a cool eye patch. Della Speech, the shotgun-wielding Texan that has really tough skin. He is really simple-minded, don't mind him. Cleopatra Rex, the queen bee that will make you bow down, peasants. I feel the slight urge to be stepped on. Weird. Royce Hull, resident lunatic and the only bat-wielding punk. You will never play him because he is shit. Cassidy, and written with a K and double E. Every game has to have a fucking lolly, but that's fine. It's fine. This one is fine. She's okay. Null Point. My brother from another mother. He's prone to kill himself. So once you pick 3 of those weirdos, you will start with the punk that was on the left. The game's prologue passes by and tells you that everyone is fucked. In 2019, epidemics, food shortages, and war ravages the world. Companies, due to nature, seize the opportunity to gain all the power and build an army of drones. They'll build luxury bunkers and vault off cities. That means either you comply with corporate law or you die in the wastes. At some point, a guy called Prophet Zero tells everyone that they should fight back. The first bunker punk gang is founded and they start raiding corporate bunkers. And so you're thrown into your first raid. You have this loading screen that shows the controls on PC on the left and the store you are in the middle and controller controls on the right. Why anyone would ever play shooters with a controller, I don't know, but I guess different folks, different strokes. On the bottom you always see a quote either telling something about the world, your character, or a verse from Prophet Zero. Those will become important later on. It finishes loading and you press any button. Should you press the shoot button, you will shoot, which is kind of dumb. If the game tells me to press a button, I don't expect to execute the action in-game even though I can't even see what is happening. Should you on top of that be equipped with an explosive weapon, you will damage yourself because rocket and grenade launchers are the only weapons that can make yourself hurt. Yourself. Yes. A solution here would be to disable shooting inside of the elevator, which could cause other problems, or disable the shoot button in the loading screen. Either of those solutions would do. Once you step out of the elevator, you have to shoot, run, open boxes, shoot, run, move on to the next floor, shoot, run, and that's basically it. You're already done, back to the bunker. That is basically all you have to do. The first bunker you enter will contain 3 types of enemies. The first enemy is an explosive proxy drone that will try to get close to you and self-destruct once they get close enough. The second enemy is a flying drone. They will follow you slowly, and once you stand on their side for a second or so, they will shoot. And the last enemies are the proxy men. They are slower than the flying drones, but they hit harder and more often. The proxy drones, let's call them proxies, are not dangerous on their own, but they group up, and they can get pretty dangerous, especially if you get cornered. The rule here is don't get close and shoot in the hole, even though you don't do more damage to drones when you shoot in their red eyes. Every drone takes the same amount of damage, independent of body parts. I know this was probably a technical choice, but when you show the player a bright red spot on the enemy, I kind of expect that specific part is going to take more damage than the other parts, but I understand. I mean, program is not easy. The flying drones, let's call them flies, are a little bit more dangerous. You can easily dodge them if you can see them, but they pose a threat when you are entering a room, and isn't that a good place to talk about procedural generation and room layout? Like I mentioned before, this game is a roguelike or roguelite, meaning that room layouts and enemy placements are semi-random. From what I experienced, it seemed that there are standard room layouts, and with the help of procedural generation, they are put together in a semi-functional way. I don't know how exactly it works, but here are my assumptions from my experiences. The game has a pre-made assets like enemies, room layouts, and objects. Those are thrown into a metaphorical bucket, shaken, and then picked up by a machine. The machine follow certain rules and build the bunker. One rule could be that the starting point and the exit of the floor are always diagonally opposed to each other. I noticed that because I can almost always find the exit when I walk to the top right of the map. Another rule could be that the strongest enemy is the boss of the floor. I noticed that because, well, the enemy with the most amount of health always unlocks the exit once they are dead. And there are probably way more rules. My point here is that the system works. It works fine. And, you know, on the surface, it provides you with different experiences and a unique floor layout every time you play, but that's not entirely true. If I show footage from the first room of the first bunker and the first room in the last bunker, you might notice that everything looks pretty similar. The difference between the first and the last bunker is the enemy type and the amount of enemies, and while this seems to be pretty cool, the first time around you notice that you have seen everything after the second or third or 50th run. On top of all of that, there are several things that annoy me. One of those things are doors. Yes, doors. Doors are not in every room, but sometimes there are doors, and directly behind those doors you have enemies that will shoot you as soon as you open the door, killing you, especially if you are playing on a brutal difficulty. Another little thing is that enemies will sometimes just shoot at you as soon as you enter the room, basically forcing you to jump into the room and continue running, which could lead into more danger. And you see the problem? The system isn't inherently flawed, or there aren't major problems with it. The problems here are that there are several little annoyances that happen because of the system. Let's take, for example, one of my biggest problems. Rooms that are connected with really small corridors create an interesting problem. Should a long-range enemy be looking straight down the corridor, it will have no room to dodge because, there is no room. A solution here is in the game itself. Make every corridor double as wide as they are right now. Unfortunately, if we solve that problem or annoyance, you have the next annoyance. For example, you should always jump into a room, continue walking and look left and right because there could be a long-range enemy on the left or right side of the room that will immediately shoot at you. So don't put enemies at the corners of walls, of rooms. But then there's the next problem called pathfinding. Enemies are not really smart. They are kind of smart. They will find you. They will track you down through the whole floor. And that can cause the enemy to just walk against a wall all the time. And there's a neat thing that happens once you walk against a wall and then walk a free patch. You are launched forward. That also happens with enemies, which could also lead to death, especially on a brutal difficulty and with the enemy charger. You see my point? There is no big problem with the system. There are small little annoyances that are codependent that you encounter and become bigger and bigger every time you encounter them, especially if you play for the 100th time. The thing is that those things don't happen that often, but when they happen, it just launches me out of the game. Clearly, that didn't keep me from going back. I played 60 hours of this game. Okay, so you shoot, run, you open more boxes, you shoot, run, you move to the next floors, you shoot and run, and you go back to the bunker. Depending on how many objects, enemies, and boxes you destroyed and how fast you were, you will have a lot of cash, or just a little bit of cash. Clearing the whole floor from enemies will give you a decent amount of creds. Playing in faster will do almost the same thing. How you play will be your choice, but depending on the difficulty, there is a right way to play the game. Alright, now you are in the bunker. What do? You spend creds, of course. On what do you spend? Upgrades, of course. Upgrades come in the form of bunkers. It's almost like it has something to do with the name of the game, Who would have guessed? Every bunker has 3 open spaces in which you can place your improvements. We have the firing range that will help you upgrade the damage of your long-range weapons, the gym that can give you perks like inventory space and more armor, the lab that can help you get more money and helps unlock your passive ability, and finally the med bay that can give you a combo heal perk and more life. I always go for the nanotech that provides you with heal once you do a combo, more damage to the weapons I'm using, more money from the lab, and more inventory so that they can pick up weapons in the bunkers and sell them later in the shop. Everything else is really up to you, but I think those upgrades are essential, especially on brutal difficulty. But there's one upgrade that becomes useless when you have everything else unlocked. Yeah, I'm looking at you, tech thingy. Fuck you.
Shut the fuck up. No one cares about your robot fanfiction. Know your fucking place, trash.
Since I mentioned the shop, I'm going to talk about those things really quick. The shop will provide you with assortments of weapons, mostly too, and clothing. I mostly sell stuff, but if I can find a grenade launcher, I will buy it. There's also a dog that will fix you up if you have spare money, and there's a small visual bug here. The shop, it's above the light pole. No one is gonna notice that. But how do they find that? I think 60 hours of anything will give you enough perspective that you will find such things. Doesn't change the game, I just noticed it. Alright, so you geared up, you upgrade your stuff, and now the raid is on. Which bunker you should raid is on you. But you should know that, for example, the security floor will be a little bit harder than the medical bay. You will find out for yourself, so there's no point in me explaining this thing. The second bunker will repeat the flow of the entry bunker, but add another floor, and then things start to ramp up. The charges are introduced. I never thought that bad doggos existed, but those are truly bad doggos. They are straight from hell. They will charge at you and maul you to death. The only thing that you can do is walk back, spray and pray, and also don't get cornered, or you will die. Should you be able to kill the doggos, you will probably meet on the big rob on the next floor. It's a big roboter that likes to blow you to pieces. Strategy here is to dodge. Next on we have the spawner. It doesn't attack you, but will spawn proxies and rollers. Rollers are little bombs that will explode on proxy. Let's call them prawlies. Prawlies are not really hard to deal with, but they do explode really quickly, so just kill it as fast as you can. And the last boss is the spider. It shoots 2 explosives. Dodge, I guess. And those are all the enemies you will encounter. It's not a gigantic assortment, but the rogue system does a decent enough job to mix things up. But as I mentioned before, after the second, third, fourth run, you probably would have seen everything. If you want a million different enemies, this game is not for you. On to the weapons. There are shotguns, rifles, pistols, explosives, and melee weapons. I fell in love with the grenade launcher, so for me every weapon lost its flair. I keep a pistol on the side, but that's it. Here's the thing, the shotgun is strong in close range and does a lot of damage, but since you are supposed to dodge shots, it can make the avoidance of damage more difficult. Rifles are long-range weapons, but don't do much damage at close range. The problem here is that there are many situations in which enemies will be far away consistently, so this becomes useless to me really quickly, which is a shame because you have a lot of ammo with this one. Pistols are very reliable, and of course they are Glocks, made by Germans. Everything we do is reliable. No. And finally, the grenade launcher or rocket launcher. The rocket launcher will fire a rocket that explodes on contact, but you only have 8 ammo. The grenade launcher will fire a grenade that can bounce off walls and will explode at contact with enemies. You have 15 ammo with this one. From a range and damage perspective, the grenade launcher is objectively the best weapon, but there is a slight problem. You can damage yourself, so if you don't build your bunker with nanotech and armor, you will die by your own hand really quickly. There is at least one other option for your favorite weapon. On the pistol side, we have something like the slow gun or revolver with high damage but really slow shooting speed. On the melee side, we have something like the stun baton or the katana, and on the others we have can you tell that the only things I used was the pistol and the rocket or grenade launcher? Hey, have we even talked about abilities yet? Oh yeah, the punks have abilities that allow them to take more damage, push people away, and do more damage. I also didn't use those. I used Molly's force push a little bit, and maybe the bigger explosion from Null Point, or the reload from Cassie, but that's it. Those are useful abilities, I just didn't use them very much. Moving on, the story. You remember when I mentioned tips on the bottom of the screen? Yeah, that's basically the story. On top of that, you have voice lines from the characters and posters on the wall that tell you that the future is fucked up. Everything is corporate, pretty much like right now. For example, if you're in debt, you're downsized. Yeah, haven't I mentioned that? The proxy men are human, and they enter the force because they would be killed otherwise? Yes, you are killing humans. Also, profits are high, therefore consume. The punks are wanted. Kill them all. What is that? Wait. Alright, once you raid the last bunker, you inspire the other gangs to do the same, and America is freed from the evil corporations. Or at least that is what I like to tell myself. Probably everyone died. What the fuck is wrong with me? Anyway, here's an interview. Enjoy! So, well, I guess the first thing we should tackle is, of course, who you are. So please tell the people who you are, what you do, and what is Bunker Punks.
Yeah, so my name's Shane Neville. I'm an indie developer. I've been making games for 25 years. I got my start at Electronic Arts, working in QA. I worked in game production on Company of Heroes. I've ran a small game studio, and I've been indie since 2010. Bunker Punks is a roguelike first-person shooter, kind of reminiscent of the classic first-person shooters like Doom and Wolfenstein, something that's really fast-paced, but it's also got a base-building element to it. And it launched into early access 4.5 years ago and came out of early access almost 2 years ago now.
Yeah, it is a little bit older. Okay, so the first thing I exactly want to know is about the early access thing. So during my research, I saw a few things that were not promised, but appeared on a trailer, and that never made into the game. One of those things being more bunkers. So here's my question: how successful was the early access phase, and how was the whole process, the whole early access process?
I really liked it. Like in terms of different bunkers being promised, we added a ton of rooms through the early access process where there were different abilities unlocked and different rooms that were unlocked. We also added more variety to the bunkers themselves and gave more options on the enemy bunkers that you could raid. So yeah, definitely. If you felt like that wasn't delivered through early access, that was a big chunk of the content that came up in early access. We almost tripled the number of guns from early access launch to the final release, added a bunch of new characters, added player buildable rooms, so player bunkers, as well as enemy bunkers that you could raid.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole process was great. There were probably 10 people in the community that throughout the process of early access were really responsive and really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I worked really hard to try and be on the forums, on the Steam forums every day, but sometimes I missed it just because I was traveling or something like that. And the community was really good. So if somebody came in that had just purchased the game and had questions or problems, the community was there if I wasn't, which was amazing. And it was also really hard because you have to. What's the right way to put this? People can ask for something,
mm-hmm.
and what they might actually want is something different.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're playtesting in person and having a conversation with somebody, say, for example, the common thing was, we need more weapons. We need more weapons. People always kept asking for more weapons. And like, the game has a ton of weapons and different ways to use them. And every weapon has it's a big part of the game, and people kept on asking for more. And at a certain point, when you're in early access, especially with a small team, like it was just me and some audio people, so I didn't have somebody to check with on the rationality side of like, okay, well, do we just add more guns? People say they want more guns. Let's add more guns. And we kept on adding and adding. And in hindsight, now that the game's done and it's kind of in a maintain mode where if there's a major bug found, I'll definitely post a fix for a major bug. I'm not working on content or anything anymore. Hindsight 2020, as I look back on it, I realized that I probably should have looked beneath the feedback I was getting from the community to see what they were looking for, because the things that they were asking for were very direct, but I think that they pointed to deeper issues in the game with regards to lack of gameplay variety, and things like that, that if you don't work in games and don't design games, all you feel is, I need more rooms, I need more guns, I need more enemies. And those things weren't necessarily the problem. It was, a lot of it was level layout was a very significant problem in the game, at least in my opinion, after the fact.
Yeah, that's quite a lot. And you talking about this, I'm thinking about the review I'm making still, and I address a lot of that. You might like it. Okay, so one of the things that got me into the game, I didn't buy it in early access because I mostly don't buy early access games. I do
Mhm.
analyze them and look at them and from a third-person view and look if they're fine to buy or not. But one of the things that brought the attention was back in the days, Jim Sterling made a positive video about bunker punks. Did that video ever influence any of the game at all? Did people find the game because of Jim Sterling, or was it something that you didn't even notice?
Oh, I think it was huge. It was really hard because Jim's video came out right when we were launching, and so we were getting a lot of attention. We got really great press coverage when we came out. Kotaku selected us as one of their best games of the month. Jim and a few high-profile Twitch and YouTubers also covered it. So it's really hard to say, the day that Jim Sterling posted his video, we sold an extra 1,000 copies. It's really, really hard to be. No, I don't. That's the thing is I can't say that happened because it was so busy at the time.
Okay.
I definitely think it moved the needle, but there were so many other things that happened that same day that I can't say that it was specifically Jim's video or somebody else streaming it on Twitch or somebody posting something on their website. So I think it was huge. The video, he was glowing. It was a glowing review. It was one of our best reviews that we got. For me, it felt great. At the time, there's certain streamers and YouTubers that you're afraid of, and so when you send them a key, you're like, well, maybe Jim, if he plays it, he'll hate it, and that would really suck because he's really good at bashing early access games, and so I was afraid. But at the same token, it's like you've got to put your games out there, and he loved it, which was great, so it was fantastic for us. But I can't say how big it affected the sales because it was just such a busy time for us.
Okay, so it was more like a cog in the machine. That's basically how I found it. But Jim was just a cog in the machine, basically.
Yeah, like I definitely think it moved the needle, but I can't say how much because so many things were happening on a day-to-day basis.
All right, good. Since we're talking about the game a little bit and about the whole process, I want to know how this procedural generation works, because let's say the system works, it's fine, but there are some problems here and there. How does the procedural generation works of this whole floor layout? How does it work? I couldn't figure it out. There are certain rules to it, like I don't know.
Tons of rules.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the basic way it works. The world is a giant square, right? Just think of the whole level is one square.
Yeah.
And then the level generation system decides how many rooms to put inside of that square. And it's usually between 4 and 6. And then as it gets later in the game, it'll add more rooms because more rooms mean more difficulty, less maneuverability, easier to get lost. It will choose the number of rooms. And then we'll also choose the parameters on size. So if there's lots of rooms, the rooms will be smaller. If there's fewer rooms, the rooms will be bigger. And then it randomly places those rooms within the square in places where they don't interact. And the first one and the last one get placed in opposite corners, and then it fills the rest of the square with those rooms. Then it will, like, if you think of the world in a very like Minecraft manner, in that like it's all a bunch of squares. Think of it as like cutting the rooms into the space. So it will cut the rooms into 3D space and choose an elevation. Once the rooms are there, it pathfinds hallways from the center of each room to other rooms until all of the rooms are connected somehow. So it basically does a bunch of pathfinding, and then as soon as they are all connected to each other, it's like, cool, we're done cutting holes. So that's why some rooms will have 2 doors, because that path might go through to another room, and some rooms will only have 1 door and be a dead end. And then once that's done, it decides on a shape for the room. So before we cut the hallways, we decide on a shape, and the shape might be an L or an H, and it actually fills in the rectangle to create the shape for the room. Then we cut the hallways. And then we decide what the fill for the room should be and if it should have one. And this is where like the rooms get more complicated as you play on in the level. So sometimes early on, it's just some pillars. Sometimes as you get deeper, it'll be like half-height pillars or like a cross in the middle of the room with holes cut out of it. There could be a random maze of walls. As you get deeper in, the rooms get a lot more convoluted. For me, making the game, I loved it because it was super random and really hard to predict. And every time I played the game, there was different challenges. The downside of it is that when you play the game for 3 hours straight, the levels do get really repetitive. And it's the nature of the limits that I'm working within. The other option, when I was first deciding what to do, there were two kind of options. One was like go full procedural, like what I'm doing, where like give it up to the random number generator and just let it be what it is, and then play with the parameters until it's fun. And the other option is build a bunch of rooms in 3D and then connect them with hallways and then populate them randomly, which gives you more authorship in what you're doing. But then if you see a room and you see the same room again, like a level later, it's exactly the same room, right? There's not as much variety. So you have to build a giant kind of like, think of it as a deck of cards, a giant deck of rooms, and then shuffle and then pull out rooms to add to your world and then populate with the right enemies. So technically, and from a development perspective, it was a lot more fun to build the game this way. But it also definitely had limitations. And, being completely honest, I was definitely at the upper edge of my programming ability to be building the game this way and, tiling the walls in a way that made sense and building the rooms. If you look at the early videos, the rooms are all very simple. They just have like a line around them. And then later on, they're dynamically textured with pipes and tiles and things like that. So I was definitely pushing my own abilities as a programmer. And I'm really happy with how it worked out in a lot of ways. But I also recognize that if you try and grind the game, if you're just playing for hours on end, it's not the best experience.
Yes, I can agree with that, and I can say out of experience, since the 0.1% of people that actually finished the game on Brutal. Yes,
it's so hard on Brutal. I know it's doable because I only had to cheat a couple times to do it myself, where it's like, okay, if I'd made a different decision, it's possible. But it is really, really hard to do on Brutal without cheating. Like, it's hats off to you.
So here's the thing, because it directly goes into the next question. I had the feeling that the game was supposed to be played quick and dirty, quick and fast. Do not care about any enemies, but run straight for everything. Just shoot the enemies you need to, and always go for the boss and just go and exit the building. That's the most fun I had with the game. But that works on easy and normal. On easy it works definitely. On normal it works with a little bit of training, and on hard it starts to slow down. You can't just run straight. And on Brutal, forget about it. Like, if you try to play the game on Brutal just by running through everything and going for the boss, you're not gonna survive.
Yeah, so absolutely.
What was the main gameplay design? How was it supposed to be played?
So the main thing I wanted to do was for the player to constantly be moving, and that's what I tuned for at easy and medium difficulty. Right, is a lot of side strafing, the occasional, you get one of the guard dogs coming at you down a hallway, so you're reversing down the hallway, unloading into something. I wanted a lot of that backpedaling, because I really feel like that's something that you don't see a lot anymore in first-person shooters, is like aggressively like, oh crap, I've got to run away, but also just like unloading into something. So I wanted that feeling. And that's kind of what I tune for. And then when you get into the harder difficulties, it's a very different game. It's a more methodical, slower paced game. But I think that's, if people really want to do it, there's also power-ups you can do. Like, you can go with certain characters that have health and shields that can let you play that way. And in certain cases, the special abilities can definitely own up to that. Like, you can play that way if you're really good with your shots with Cleopatra Rex, for example, and you use
Yeah.
her special ability to like buff up your shots, so you're running in, sniping somebody, keeping moving to dodge all the other shots. There's different ways to play with the abilities where you can still play aggressively on brutal, but it's just the damage is so high and it hits you so hard. It's really unforgiving. So you need to use a character like Dallas, for example, or Cassidy. Yeah, or Null Point too. But like Cassidy's really good too because she heals, and Dallas has a shield, so it gives you that forgiveness of one terrible mistake where you get hit once and you're like, okay, well, I got hit, but the shield took it, so I can go out and do something else.
Yeah. Yeah, I did it with Null Point, and basically, the rocket launchers or the grenade launchers are the strongest weapons in the game.
Yeah,
they are. I think you did it intentionally. That the downside is you can hurt yourself. That's because if you didn't hurt yourself, this would be a cakewalk with Null Point. It's like, yep, just as soon as you get a grenade launcher, the game is over. You won. Just shoot everything with a grenade launcher.
Yeah, and the grenade launcher is also one of the hardest weapons to use too, because the shots bounce, and so it's a very difficult weapon to use in a lot of ways. So it takes more practice to be proficient with it.
And maybe after my 50 hours of a grenade launcher, I'm very effective at it.
Yeah, and then it's fun. Like it's super fun bouncing shots off walls around corners, and then like you come around a corner and somebody's there, and if you hit them with your grenade launcher, you're going to take it to the face. So you're like, I can't do this. So you might have to switch to a shotgun. Like grenade launcher shotguns, super effective combo if you're using grenade launcher. So that if somebody's in your face, you can switch to the shotgun and just blast them. And then at a distance, the grenade launcher is just a wrecking ball.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: the game is supposed to be played quick and dirty. So I didn't understand, why does the game increase the damage and health the enemies in the high difficulties and make the game slower? Wouldn't it be like the logical conclusion to increase the amount of enemies instead of making the enemies hit harder and more hit harder? Like, do you understand what I mean? Like, wouldn't be the logical conclusion be just more enemies so that the player has to deal with a wave of enemies, like a zombie horde or something like that?
I think that's a totally valid design decision. There's a lot of, within the procedural generation, being able to populate a room, especially later on in the level as there's more objects. Sometimes it's really hard to put effective enemies in a room. So by like stacking up the enemy number, it created other problems. But yeah, it's a totally valid design decision. We just chose to go a different way.
Okay, because I saw, I think on my last run, I think I have footage of that. On the last run, there was a room with 10 turret towers. And I'm like, oh god! And I gladfully had the grenade launcher and just killed the boss. It was the last room of the last floor of the last bunker. I killed the boss. And then I just sprinted to the exit, and then it was like, oh, done. Achievement acquired, thanks, bye. I'm never gonna play it on hard again. But then I come back, I noticed, I'm coming back to play hard again. Why am I doing this to myself? So yeah, it's definitely something that is weird. The game entices you to play over and over again. But well, yeah. Next thing is bosses. Since we're talking about bosses already, there are, I think, like 4 to 5 bosses. The Big Rob, the Spawner, the Spider, the Charger, and the Proxy Man on the first floor. At some point, was there more bosses planned? Maybe flying bosses, bosses that do have a special ability that that you can see and then you have to dodge them or something like that. Was there something in that direction planned?
There was, I think early on, I wouldn't say planned, but I had thoughts of like more traditional adventure game style bosses, like something you might see in a Zelda or something like that, where the boss has a very specific attack pattern and you've got to recognize the pattern to defeat them. And there were a couple of things where we had prototyped it like that, but it really felt like a very different game. And I was just really enjoying playing it with using basically the boss on this level is going to be kind of what the normal enemies are in a few levels.
Yeah.
It's kind of that. I'm not going to say it's a Dark Souls thing, but it's a very standard thing in games. It's like, hey, this is really hard for you now, but in the future, it won't be. And originally, you had to clear a level to finish Bunker Punks,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't a boss that you had to kill to unlock the room. You had to kill every enemy. And what that resulted in is there were people like, I killed everybody and the door didn't open.
They were missing one.
Yeah, and they just missed one, right? And it's like and this was before we had the mini map too. Like the mini map in the corner wasn't always there.
Mm.
And I remember once I was watching a YouTuber replay, and he's like, I killed everyone and the door's not open. And he's complaining about it on the video. And watching his video, I saw the enemy he didn't kill. And to me as a designer, I'm just like, this is not his problem. This is my problem.
Yeah.
As a designer, I have to fix this. And so the decision, generally speaking, besides chargers, most of the enemies will stay in the last room, unless you like go and trigger them and then like really wander.
Yeah.
And I had to build a bunch of different things too, where if you go out of range, they kind of enter a hibernation state unless they're an enemy that charges at you, so that they won't leave the room. So there was a bunch of things that I had to do to prevent those kind of I killed everyone and the door didn't open kind of complaints, because it wasn't a bug. Like there was never a situation where they were reporting an actual problem with the game. It was just they were misunderstanding and missing things. And that's still on me as a designer to fix. So that's kind of how the current level boss system works, is that it just because of previous other design problems. But I agree. I think like having specific bosses would be really compelling, especially like if there were like 2 or 3 landmark moments throughout the map where it's like, maybe but then it's, when you look at the nature of roguelikes, I feel like the amount of work it goes into building a boss, and then once you figure out their pattern, it's not compelling to play anymore. Where when you've got like, okay, this is the boss room, and the boss, and there might even be multiple units that could be the boss in that last room, right? So it's like, oh, there's a charger. There's 3 chargers. Which one's the boss? Do I need to like kill all 3? And I just felt like it was more dynamic, more replayable.
It's definitely replayable, but I think after 60 hours, like me, like I'm noticing a lot of little annoyances that I don't want to deal with it anymore. One of the things being, or 2 things being, enemies that shoot you on sight when you enter a room, and doors, and enemies behind doors. Like, I probably people notice that, but I don't know, like, how do enemies see you? Because if any,
so it's all based on ray tracing. So
okay,
if there's an enemy behind a door, there's really only 2 ways that would ever happen. One is that's just where they randomly spawned. So as soon as you open the door, they're like, "Oh, hello, you're here. Boom, I'm going to shoot you," and they were just spawned there. And that, it happens, but it happens pretty rarely.
Yes, it does.
The other way it can happen,
it does rarely, but it's like, after you tried it for the 30th time on Brutal, you're like, this is too much, please stop.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
It's like, and I mentioned that in the video, it's not that the system doesn't work. It works perfect, almost flawlessly. But every time a little annoyance happens, it's like, oh, brain, stop.
Yeah, and it's something that I could have designed around it. But honestly, every single time that it happened to me, it was a surprise. And I think that there's something about opening a door to a new space that creates an opportunity for surprise. And like, yes, in Brutal, where you're like so focused on surviving, but Brutal is not what I tune for.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
And I don't think any game designer should tune for Brutal. I think Brutal should be compelling, but it should be a difficult experience no matter what kind of game it is. And so I was always tuning for, medium. So it's like, if you open up the door and there's somebody there, unless you're really low health, you should be able to survive it, right? And it also, like, I got in the habit of keeping a pistol or a shotgun handy whenever I would open a door. room, you know. So if I was going
Yeah.
grenade launcher, I'm like, all right, here's a door. Boom, switch to the close range weapon, open it up. If there's nobody there, I can switch back and unload. So it's like, I think your tactics change, but I agree with the frustration, and I know it's super frustrating on brutal, but I almost think that you're asking for something brutal when it's not called very difficult. It's literally called brutal, because I know that the systems in the game can be really punishing.
Yeah, I'm against the whole difficulty thing. I'm more like, you intended it to be like normal and hard. If then it should be like one difficulty, and there should be more like add things that I can add to make my life more difficult. Like I get more damage but less life, something like that. I can tweak my own difficulty instead of having difficulties and then changing the whole game up. It was still an interesting experience, but I don't think I will ever try to finish on brutal again.
Yeah, no, it's an achievement, that's for sure. And and again, this is one of those things where that was the feedback we got in early access. People were like, we want harder difficulty. So I added hard, and they're like, this isn't hard, give us really hard. I'm like, all right, well, here we go, let's make brutal really, really hard. And so and then nobody complained. And so it's that kind of thing where sometimes in early access, your lens in which you're viewing the feedback can be skewed, because a lot of times you feel like you're plugging holes as opposed to improving the game. And so it's like, well, people are complaining about X, we've added this. Are they still complaining? No. Then it must be good. But you don't actually know, because you're not having a conversation with these players. It's all done through message boards. And sometimes, like, we had a great community on Bunker Punks. I think there were only a couple people that were really toxic, but sometimes people can be really demanding. And you're like, well, clearly this is something that's really upsetting to them. And an option is always an option, right? Like, people can turn it on, people can turn it off, people can choose to play on a difficulty. If they don't like it, they can change their mind, right?
That is correct.
And so putting it in as an option, I'm not forcing anyone to play on brutal, but yeah, I agree. It's really punishing. It's like, hats off to you. Those 60 hours are well earned.
Yeah. And it was fun. That's the thing. I had other games that I had to play for a long time to get everything done, and it wasn't fun. So kudos to Bunker Punks. It's at least I can say that it's fun, even though it's very frustrating at some point. And then later on easy, I'm like, is this even a game anymore? Like, I'm just trying everything, just running through everything. Because there's a achievement that you have to play 25 wins in 100 times. And those are like, yeah, this is a breeze for me. Who do you think I am?
And I think a lot of that, I think the one thing I did really well on Bunker Punks that I'm really proud of is, I think the gun feel is really good.
Yes.
I think shooting enemies, the impact when they get hit, the explosions, just running around and shooting things with every single weapon feels really good. And I spent a lot of time working on that. And it was something that, if you played some of the early prototypes, it sucked. It was boring as hell. And there's a great video by JW from Vlambert called The Art of Screen Shake, and that really helped improve a lot of things for Bunker Punks, was just following JW's advice and putting that stuff in. So I know you look at development. I saw the video from Jake Burkett on your Discord server. And so if you're looking at making action games, doing what Vlambert does is probably the best advice you can give anyone making action games.
I mean, it's difficult to do, and since I look at a lot of prototypes and a lot of early access titles, I can see, for example, this Bunker Punks has a good impact feeling, meaning if I shoot something, I get a feedback that shows me, oh, it's doing something. One of the things being that oil or blood splatters everywhere. So you're saying, oh, okay, I'm doing damage. And in other games that try to do shooting, and you shoot at someone and you don't get feedback, like nothing happens, but you're still doing damage, and that feels really boring.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And and this was kind of my start in the industry too. One of my first jobs that I got outside of QA was I tuned car physics in Need for Speed games, and I did script writing in car physics. But that was my job, was just making things feel good. you know.
Okay.
So it's something that I'm used to doing, but I have to definitely credit the Art of Screen Shake video, because it just gives you a lot of really simple tips that you can follow that can help make a game feel a lot better really fast.
Okay, since we're talking about game feel and everything, I want to ask you about the red eyes on the enemies. So in the beginning, I thought if I aim very good, and I shoot at the eyes of the enemies, I'm going to do more damage. That's not the case. Is this like more?
No, it's not the case.
Is this more like Is this more like a technical thing, or was this like you never even thought about it?
So,
or both.
I thought about headshots for a while. I think I maybe even prototyped them, and the reason that the eyes glow is that the lighting changed a lot throughout development, and there was a time where the game was quite dark.
Yeah.
And the glowing eyes just felt really awesome. It just looked really good. It felt good. Yeah, and on my side, technically, it was really easy to do. You know, you just put the eye on a different layer and give it a different shader, and that's it. Like, it was really easy. I think it adds a lot to the feel and mood of the game. It helps you identify the enemies. Like, when you're making a fast-paced game, the ability to quickly assess the layout of a room is really important. And so being able to differentiate between this is treasure, this is an obstacle, this is a wall, and this is a threat, it's really important in Bunker Punks. And so that the people who succeeded at Bunker Punks early on, before I put in a lot of these different little systems, were the ones who could get a read on the room because they'd played a lot of first-person shooters. But the ones who hadn't would like confuse chests or crates and things like that. And as soon as I added the glowing eyes in the enemy, it made a really big difference. And in some of when we had really dark levels, it was amazing. It felt really cool. But then it really made navigating the room harder once I put in more variations in the layout of the room with walls. Having a poorly lit room just did not work at all, because I can't, just for performance reasons, I couldn't light all of the hallways. It would just chug the game down. So I had to increase the ambient light to the point where, you know, you didn't come into a room and just see all these glowing eyes for drones that are just closing in on you, which felt so good. But it's just something we couldn't put into the game because of performance reasons.
Yeah, I noticed. I saw videos with dimmer lighting on the rooms and enemies with glowing eyes, and that looked to a certain extent better than the product we got. It's still, both are acceptable. Just the one looked for me better than the other.
Yeah, but I agree completely. It's there were other problems attached to that solution.
Yeah, that's the thing. When I think back of the game, when I talk about annoyances, all the little annoyances, they're connected. Even if you solve one, there will be other problems. So how it is now, it works fine. That's what I literally say in the video. It works fine, and the game is not about only that. It's about other things, like how does the shooting feel, and things like that. So it's difficult to pinpoint what is annoying me the most, but I think it will be done in the video. We will see. I'm still writing it. I don't know. It will. Let me say this. It is something that is very interesting to look at. But that's
I agree completely. You know, I think if I was to make another Bunker Punks game, there's a lot of things I would do different, and there's a lot of things I would do the same. You know, I think I would definitely change out how the base management stuff works. I think there's a lot of really cool ideas in there, but I don't think it's hits on all fronts. I would definitely try and keep the gun feel. I think the gun feel is amazing. I could probably do it a little bit better, you know, and make it feel even better. I would definitely reevaluate how I do the levels. And I don't even know if I made another first-person shooter, if I would go roguelike. Just because the necessity of roguelikes is dynamic level generation, and I think there's a lot of problems with that when it comes to first-person shooters and understanding the layout of a game, or a layout of a level. And so, you know, I think there's a lot of things that work really good, and there's just some things that we tried and we tried and we tried, and what we came up with, like you said, it's fine, it's good. But I think it could have been great with a couple other different situations, right? So that's kind of, but again, at the end of the day, it's a game I'm super proud of. I think it's a really fun game. You dropped 60 hours into it. I think that says a lot. I think a lot of games, I bounce off a lot of games after an hour, or even half an hour. Just like, I can't keep going. And I still every time that I have to fix a bug in Bunker Punks, I'm like, all right, I get to play Bunker Punks again. I still have fun playing it. So there's still a lot there that I'm really happy with.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned the whole roguelike thing, and that is one of my points. I think this game could have been better, like not just fine, but good, or even something really, really good. If it was, it seemed to have like a grasp on design and how to do it, and use the precision generation as a tool to get the stuff you wanted. But I think if you sat down and really designed levels that people would go through with weapon placements and enemy placements all on your own, I think it could. But because you mentioned Doom and Unreal as one of the inspirations, like if it was done that way, like designed by someone, it could have been better.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, the whole roguelike thing is cool and all, and but since I'm exactly at this point at the review, there are, let's say, I play roguelike games, but every regular roguelike game is there's something missing, and this thing being it's partially random, but yet on the other hand, it's every time the same. So it's random and the same at the same time. And after, like I said, after 60 hours, I wish I could just play through a normal story. And let's go to the story since I talk about that. The story is basically one intro scroll and one outro scroll. And I don't know, like, was there anything planned, or was just to frame the whole thing? Because it very, very underdeveloped a little bit.
Yeah, no, and that's very intentional.
Okay.
I think that what I wanted to get was I wanted people to get into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I wanted to use was a lot of environmental storytelling. So there's like atmospheric audio, there's the different enemies and
posters.
The ways they yell, the posters in the world, kind of the naming conventions within the different bunkers, these research centers and medical centers and things like that, but they're strongholds for the corporate elite.
Profits are high, consume.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was what I wanted to get at, and mainly because I felt like if you go down the path of doing a roguelike and trying to tell a very specific story, the game gets really repetitive really fast. Because you're like, oh, it's this cutscene again, or it's this text scroll again. Where if I say, here's the world, do what you want with it in the world, and pick your characters. And I think each of those characters, the voice acting is something that I spent a ton of time on and a ton of money on, because everybody in that game is a professional voice actor. Mm-hmm. And I think it paid off, because I think that each character has, within that character, there is a story to their background that's within their voice acting. And it's not, they're not going to come out and say, I grew poor in this small town and my parents did this, but you can kind of get a feeling for how they talk and how they respond to the enemies, what their background might be. And that's kind of what I wanted to get at, is like, here's the world, here's a bunch of different things that will make you ask questions and let you piece the rest of the story together yourself. And I think that those are, between the characters and the environment, that's where I wanted to really focus on the storytelling, instead of saying, this is the story, and if you choose path A, it's slightly different than path B. But I just think it gets repetitive really fast, as opposed to saying, I'm playing Cleopatra Rex, and I've played her for 4 hours, and she just said something I've never heard her say before. Mm-hmm. What is that about? And like, some of her voice cues are really rare, Like most of them have voice cues that are really rare.
Wow, okay.
And so then you start to piece together who this character might be in this world and why they're doing this. And they all have different motivations. And so it was more character focused for me than it was, this is your personal story going through. So yeah, it's that's kind of my approach to it. And I think that when you get into roguelikes with really heavy-handed stories, it just gets really boring really fast.
It doesn't work.
You just start skipping them, right?
It doesn't work. It works to a certain extent. For example, if you have like just notes that you can find and put in a library and then go back and read it. But if you're constantly having the same cutscene, of course it doesn't work. But what you mentioned with the voice lines, I definitely noticed that since I played a lot of Cassie, Molly, and Nullpoint, you notice that Cassie is very chipper and happy and not afraid of anything. And you notice that Molly is super grunty and like a veteran. She talks a little bit deeper. And Nullpoint is constantly shitting on the corporation and saying, fuck off, guys.
Yeah.
So you definitely notice, and especially in combination with the lines, with the info on the bottom of the loading screen, you notice, okay, I got those characters. Okay, all right. Yeah.
And that's where I wanted to focus. Like, I always play Cleopatra Rex because I had such a blast writing her lines and then recording them.
Mm-hmm.
It's Elspeth, the Twitch streamer. If you're familiar with Elspeth, she did the voice acting for that, and she was so amazing, just so amazing. And I still like Cleopatra Rex. She's the best.
I think she has the best voice lines. I didn't play her, unfortunately, because I'm not the I didn't like the gun of. I mostly played pistols and rocket launchers. Even the standard rocket launcher. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do myself damage, but you know what? I'm just gonna buy some nanotech and just deal with it afterwards.
Yeah.
Shotgun felt. In comparison to rocket launcher, everything feels weak. Everything.
Yeah, and it's funny because, and you can see this on the message boards. The arguments on which weapons are overpowered and which weapons are the best really relate to how people like to play. Yeah, and I think that was definitely my goal.
Well,
I'm very much a pistol person.
Yeah.
So.
With the grenade launcher, is actually like, it does the most amount of damage. There's no discussion around that. You shoot two or three shots at any enemy and they're dead. Even the bosses, at the end, you don't need to unclip everything if you have at max range, at max damage.
Yeah, grenade launchers, especially with all the buffs, it's devastating.
Yep,
sure.
It's just brings everything down, and that's why I loved it. And especially if you land a shot on a flying enemy with the grenade launcher, and then explodes and takes everyone with them. It's great. It's great.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So I think almost everything I wanted. But I want to know what is going on with Ninja Dinosaur right now. What are you guys working on?
So I spent a lot of 2018. That's when Bunker Punk's release was in 2018 at Early Access. I spent most of that year doing consulting work, doing project management for a company kind of in the middle of Canada that a friend of mine runs. And it was really hard for me to get traction on starting a new project. I don't know if you've ever worked in management before, but whenever you're managing something, most of my career before I went indie, it's not just taking time. It takes a lot of your brain energy. Like when you're out for a walk or you're having a shower, you're always thinking about the challenges that the team is facing, right? And so I really enjoyed the work, but I just wasn't getting any traction on any of my indie games. And so then I quit that job, but at the same time, I had a whole bunch of health problems. I had to get my gallbladder removed and had a major surgery for that. And I had some other issues. So basically since Bunker Punks came out, like the year afterwards, I really didn't get anything done. And so now I'm in the early prototyping phase on a new game, very, very different. And definitely too early to talk about it, but it's something I'm really excited about. And I'm also talking with a local artist about doing something together, and we're throwing ideas around. So hopefully, what are we in now? We're middle of October. Hopefully before the end of the year, I'll have something announced.
All right.
definitely smaller. Bunker Punk's beginning to end was 4.5 years. My previous game before that was a game called Shellraiser on mobile. And that game was 6 months with me and 2 friends. And that was by far the most fun I've ever had making a game. It was a massive success. It was a huge hit on iPhone and Android. It did really great for us. It's unfortunately no longer available on the platform because it wasn't 64-bit. But if you look up Shellraiser, it's a game about a turtle with giant guns on his back, and he shoots stuff and things blow up. And it's a super fun game.
I might have played it.
It was good. It did great for us, and it was 6 months. And I kind of want to get back to shorter dev cycles, so smaller scale games, working more collaboratively with people, and definally not doing 4.5 years on one game again.
Yeah, I mean, you're good. You're good on track, because I have a game that I'm looking at right now. There are 6 years in active development, but 15 years in development actually. And it's not. And it's not Star Citizen.
indie development, just game development in general, but indie development especially when you're working at the lower end of the field in terms of fidelity. Like if you're making a AAA game, you've got a budget of like $80 million. Cool, you're playing in a different ballpark than most indies. But if you're working with a team of 1 to 4 people and your budget is $200,000 or $300,000, or no budget, you have so much competition. And it's such a crazy market right now in terms of discoverability. Bunker Punks kind of launched into early access right at the end of before the quote unquote indie apocalypse started. So our early access launch went really well. The launch out of early access did not do as well as the initial launch, and that's expected now. But before, the idea was if you did an early access launch and then a full launch, you got 2 launches on Steam, and Steam doesn't operate that anymore. The algorithm doesn't think that way, and so I want to do more games. I want to do smaller games. I want to do games that more people can play. I want to do stuff that's more narratively driven, but still has action that feels really good. So there's a whole bunch of things I want to explore, but I don't want to make huge games anymore, because I think if I spent 4 years on Bunker Punks and then launched it now on Steam, I think I'd probably make 25% of what I ultimately made. And what I ultimately made was not great. I definitely needed to do, I teach at a local video game design school. I do a lot of freelance consulting as a designer and as a project manager and in business development. That's what pays the bills. Bunker Punks did not pay the bills. It paid for lattes, basically. I can't, as a professional developer, I can't really spend 4 years on a game. I can't look at the market and be like, that's a good strategy, because games can come out and literally sell tens of copies. There's a former student of mine, I can't remember what his game was called, but he launched it and it was good. It wasn't a great game, but it was a good game. He literally sold tens of copies. And it wasn't one of those game-like apps on Steam where it's not even a game. It's just it just exists there. And it wasn't terrible. You look at it, the art looked good, the gameplay was good, it was a solid game. It didn't get any coverage, and it just kind of came out on Steam and on a couple of consoles and then faded away. And he had spent 2 years and a team of 3-4 people and some investment money, and that's all that happened. And it's just that's the reality for indie development right now, is that you can work your butt off on something and sell 10, 20, 30, 40 copies, and that's it. And that's devastating, right? So I think being a little bit more experimental with the content, but shorter with the dev times and and smaller budgets definitely is a smart way to go.
Okay, I want to talk about this after the episode, because I have a few inputs. But here, I think it's important. But let's wrap up the interview first.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I ask everyone as the last question is if you have any advice for people that are starting out right now in the industry, since we talked about this. What advice would you give them if they're starting out right now and trying to develop a game?
Make the smallest game possible, and just get it done and put it out on itch. I think a lot of indie developers, aspiring developers, have their dream game in their head. And for a long time, that dream game was an MMO, and now maybe it's a Dark Souls-like or a Metroidvania. Start way smaller. Make a top-down shooter that's like an old school side-scrolling shooter, something like that. Like, make something really simple so that you can experience what it's like to start and finish something. Because it's so easy to fall into that trap of you're building something and then somebody else makes something different, so you add some more features to your game, and it just never gets done. And the indie community is super, super awesome as long as you're making a game, and then the game's out there. And so I think itch is a great place to make some weird little small experimental games. There's one game, I can't remember the name of it right now, but you're literally just walking around an island that has a lighthouse on it. And that's all you do. You walk around the island, you go up to the top of the lighthouse, you can look through binoculars and see whales in the distance. There's a couple things you can interact with, and that's it. And it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. Like, I still spark it up on occasion just to like zone out. That's the kind of scale I think most people making indie games should start off at, and not worry about, is it commercially viable? Is it something that's marketable? Just make something, finish it, and then you'll know what it takes to finish a game. And then you can kind of scope up from there. I think there's too many games that never get finished because the developer really wants to make their dream game out the gates, and they just aren't ready to do it. And so start small, start simple, and just get something really, really basic done.
All right. I think you probably, I heard this so many times, but I can only agree because so many developers always tell me the same thing. Scope it small.
Yeah, I teach at Vancouver Film. Go ahead.
Yeah, do things in 2 weeks. Throw it up, see what people give us feedback, and if it's good, continue developing it. Yeah,
or even start something new. It's getting something done. I teach at Vancouver Film School here. They have a great game design program, and I'm always surprised at how many of the students who have decided that they want to be a game designer for a career had never made a game before coming to the program.
Okay.
It's like if you wanted to go to art school, but you had never made a drawing before. And that's kind of the scale that people should start at when they're looking at making their games, is something that you can finish in a week, super simple, and then build from there, start something new. You look at, a local developer here, Matt Thorson from Celeste. Celeste and Towerfall are both amazing games and hugely successful, but you can track Matt's development as a developer and go back and play some of their old indie games, Flash games, little experimental games. Give Up Robot is a great precursor to Celeste, and it's a very, very simple game with the very simple mechanics. And you can see Matt as they develop into this amazing level designer and game developer. It didn't all start with Celeste, Celeste is 10 years of hard work is what made Celeste and Towerfall huge successes.
But I've heard this so many times, so I assume that might be a truth. Slowly. I'm thinking about doing a video where I compile every advice I receive on indie devs. But yeah. Okay, so last thing, everyone gets a chance to plug everything they have. So please plug away. Tell the people what they should do with their time, where they should follow you, what they should buy, maybe.
Well, check out Bunker Punks. I think we spent a lot of time on this interview criticizing Bunker Punks, but it's a super fun game.
Yes.
It's not perfect. I don't think, besides Breath of the Wild, I don't think any game is perfect. But it's a super fun game. It's going to be on sale for 70% off for the rest of the year in every Steam sale that's coming up. There is a bundle coming up with Fanatical Bundle towards the end of the month as well, where you'll be able to get it really cheap. So it's a great time to pick up Bunker Punks if you just want to try it out. On almost all social media, my tag is Shane Neville, ShaneNeville. You can just follow me there, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or whatever. I generally somehow got away with the same handle everywhere, which is just my name. It's really nice. So give me a follow. I've kind of been in radio silence mode for a while, but once the new game gets ready, I'll be a lot more active and can see what I'm cooking up.
All right, thank you. So after all the complaining, presenting what I think is wrong with the game, what do I think about Bunker Punks? It's good. Holy fucking shit, I have 60 hours in this game. Don't you think I could play 60 hours of a shitty game? The art is fucking amazing. The gunplay feels great. The enemies are fine. The maps are meh. But the voiceover, holy shit, it's good. It's very fucking good. The game really shines on the easy and normal difficulty. It's fast, it's quick, it's dirty. You go in, kill the boss, move on. Don't think, just move, aim, shoot. It feels great. On hard and brutal difficulty, the game turns into a slower, more methodical thing. Think first, but think fast, because enemies will kill you, and they kill fast. So you're actually getting 2 games in one. What a deal. Would I recommend it? Heck yeah! I haven't mentioned that I played it for 60 hours, and that I'm one of the 0.2% of the people that actually finished the game on hard. Yeah, your boy is hardcore. Yeah. Praise me in the comments. Bow down to me, the god of Bunker Punks. And if you want, buy the game, finish up, try brutal difficulty, and try to be the part of the special Finnish people club. Yeah. One thing that I didn't mention was the whole achievement thing. It was important for this game. I liked the achievements fine. I was just 1 or 2 that I didn't like. But, that's so not important for the whole game. Yeah, I would say buy this one. It's good. So, subscribe, notifications on, like, comment, follow me on Twitter, join the Discord. Yeah, take care of yourselves, and have a nice and wonderful and freedom fighting day.